Why Black History Month is important to me is because it's a month to celebrate the people before us who sacrificed their freedom, voiced their opinions in order for people of color to live freely in society today.
I feel as if in schools nowadays it's something that's only talked about in a month. So for me, I'd like to take advantage of knowing my history and teaching my future offspring about the history of my culture.
Black History Month is important to me because it allows us the opportunity to really celebrate and explore the different contributions that Black people have made to our society. And I think for me, it's more about celebrating not just the accomplishments that we've made, but also the progress that we've made in recent years.
It's celebrating the history, especially as myself, a first-generation student. Just being able to be in this institution is history itself. Getting up and going to class every day, playing for a sports team, and as a woman, that's history.
Black History Month to me is both, I think, a celebration and a realization. I think a celebration of how far we've come as a community, and both the realization of how far we still have to go. My earliest memory of becoming aware of racism or experienced racism would probably come in hockey.
A couple of instances playing rep hockey where you hear racial slurs on the ice, and it took me getting older to actually realize what was kind of going on.
I've had many coaches who would use the N-word. They would attach stereotypes to the way I played.
It really just made me angry to know that people were looking at me and making assumptions about what I was doing just because of the way that I looked.
It was my second day of school when one of the students in the class said a racial slur to me, and I really didn't understand what it meant. But I know he offended me just the way he said it to me. I went home and I asked my mom, and she couldn't believe what I had told her. And that day on, I understood what being of color was.
For me, like, racism, it comes like subtle in a sense, where it's like, oh, because you're Black, you're only gonna play, you know, running back or receiver or linebacker in a sense.
Being treated like that and having those experiences, it almost made the sport not fun. But persevering and, you know, seeing other people who look like me make the Olympics and make the higher teams, it provided a bit of encouragement that I was missing.
Quite a bit if I meet someone for the first time and they kind of take a look at me and assume that I play a specific sport, and are kind of shocked when I say hockey. And I think that's partially because hockey's dominated by white and Caucasian players. It was a tournament that I was playing in. That was the first time I heard a racial slur used against me, and it kind of was like almost a shock, I guess, just because it was the first time that I kind of had to deal with it. And it happened a few times kind of throughout my career.
And it's never been really overt for me. It's never been name calling or people saying things outright that are racist. But again, with microaggressions, people saying things like, oh, you're Black, of course you play basketball, or oh, you're Black, so you must be athletic, so it makes sense where you're doing so well in your sport. And saying things like that has really just undermined the amount of work and the amount of effort that I put into being successful in my sport.
Microaggression is discrimination against a group of marginalized individuals.
There are often comments or statements made about someone, and they're directed but not necessarily aimed. By that I just mean that they're directed at a group of people or a person, typically based on stereotypes, but they're not necessarily said with the intention of making that person feel bad or in perpetuating stereotypes.
I think it's also important to remember that microaggressions don't just apply to Black history. Microaggressions can be used in many different settings against many different minorities, whether that's Aboriginal people, whether it's members of the LGBTQ2IA+ community. There's so many instances where microaggressions are used, and I think the biggest thing is to, again, help raise awareness.
Something that I've faced consistently throughout my life has been people saying things along the lines of, you're smart for a Black girl, or that you're pretty for a Black girl.
You know, I hear it all the time, you're pretty for a Black girl. You know, why can't it just be you're pretty, period? When you attach something else to your compliment because the standards of beauty or the standards of academics or the standards of intelligence or anything aren't really what people would attach to being a Black person.
Whenever I think about that being said to me, especially when I was younger, it made me second guess myself a lot and made me kind of feel like I was out of place in a lot of spaces and not safe in a lot of spaces, because saying that because I'm a black girl, it almost made me feel like that because I'm black, I'm not supposed to be smart or talented or pretty. And just having grown up with that, I internalized a lot of those feelings. And now I'm in a better place, but I think at the time I felt like I was the only one going through it, which is why I think it's really important to know what microaggressions are, to be aware of what we're saying to other people. I
feel like there's a lot of unawareness when it comes to some of the social movements surrounding Black history. And I feel like it's just a way of kind of increasing that recognition, having those conversations, whether it's with friends, family, or just peers and colleagues, just to kind of raise that awareness and hopefully learn from mistakes and make the world a little bit of a better place.
I think it's really important to be aware that we as Black people have a lot of shared experience, have a wealth of knowledge of the experiences that we've been through our stories, through our experiences, and not just to be willing to listen to those stories, but also be willing to act on what we say, to believe us when we say that things aren't okay, and to want to change.
Just get to know the person for who they are instead of what color they are, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what the world needs right now, and I hope that we could change that to a brighter future.
I think it's really important to know that, for me as a Black student athlete, to know that there are safe spaces and that people want to care and that people want to change for the better.
If everyone were to buy in to actually making change, I think it could happen pretty quickly. But the only way we do that is by using our voices and our platforms to let the message be heard.
You know, it's not just lip service, it's not just promises that people say, or, you know, the posting of certain hashtags or something. It's the fact that we celebrate every single milestone and every single step and advancement that women and women of color are making.
As a community that we could take is to reiterate why we are in this movement and why we fight for change. I fight for change and racial equality because I look like you, I dress like you, and I talk like you, and I feel that I should be treated the same way.